As COVID mutates and Dr. Fauci doubles down on doubling masks, coronavirus cabin fever is common here. And in the Netherlands, the sixth happiest country in the world, according to Gallup polling mashed up with a wide variety of other data, things are going well because of 5 Dutch parenting principles spelled out by moms.com. Children who get a good night's rest are physically healthier and have better mental health and attention and memory than those who don't, who are more prone to obesity and depression. Dutch kids have less screen time and more outdoor play time. And while American parents chauffeur kids here and there, bicycling is big in Holland. And there's no texting at the table. Dinner bonding is part of Dutch culture. And note, if possible, when it comes to working part-time, but even full-time work at homes here in the USA have had more quality family time during the shutdown, or have they? Let's ask social worker, school board member, and mom of 2, Penny Collins. Penny, based on your own experience at home and the folks you counsel and your friends and your kids and their buds, net this out for us. Has this whole year of stay at home and keep to as few people as possible introduced stress into kids' lives, or has it multiplied the number of what we used to call Kodak moments?
Sure. It's a great question. I think the answer isn't very straightforward. So the Dutch article that you shared is a lot of good common sense parenting advice. However, it's also pretty idealized, and right now we're living in less than ideal circumstances. So things like screen time are up for kids because they're doing school online. Parents are trying to manage their day. And particularly the working piece in the US, 65% of our families have 2 working parents, and of single parent families, 80% of them are led by a working mom. So families who have flexibility have had a lot of increased family time with their kids, but it's not necessarily equal. And kids are extremely resilient. So it's been valuable to have them home with us. We've enjoyed it at our house, but the kids are going to remember this largely as an adventure. The people I'm most worried about are women. So mothers are taking on the workload more than ever. Moms are leaving the workforce in droves. Jobs that we're seeing lost belong to women. They're taking on at-home schooling. They're taking on more emotional labor in the household. And moms will always make those Kodak moments for their kids, no matter what, at any cost. So the Kodak moments aren't going down for our kids because we won't really allow it as moms. The question for me is that I'm asking is, what is the cost to women?
Yeah, based on what you say, and at the risk of generalizing, it seems like the grown-ups are more stressed than the kids. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be. We want to protect our children. We want to guard against them being stressed out and being overwhelmed, being anxious. And I think that's where the article has a lot of good points. If we can keep our kids on these nice sleep routines, if we can minimize the screen time, get them outside, put down the phones at dinner, this is all routine advice that I would give. And I think it is even more important now. I just think we have to make room to have grace for ourselves and each other, that it's also a really hard time to achieve these best case scenarios.
Yeah, kids will not realize how much Christmas means to Santa Claus until they're old enough to be Santa Claus. We're speaking with Penny Collins, clinical social worker and adoption program director at Adoption Partners of Maine. And when Penny was here with us last month, we talked about how the pandemic is impacting adoption. And if you missed that show, you can find it where you'll find all our shows archived at youtube.com/thebigpictureRT. And Penny, that last visit you had with us was just before President Biden's inauguration. How does that changing of the guard resonate with the second grader and the seventh grader you live with?
It was really interesting. I'm glad we've got to follow up on this topic. We watched it at home. We made a really big deal of it as a family, watched the parade, watched all the pomp and circumstance, and talked a lot about the gravity of the historic nature of the transfer between these two administrations. And what was funny and interesting to me is that my kids didn't have the same really strong reaction that I did. My 12-year-old pointed out to me that, her lifetime, the first 8 years of her life, there was a black man as president. She saw a woman as the Democratic nominee in our last election, and now she sees a woman of color as vice president. So she's saying, Mom, this is what I expect to see, which is really nice, to see that shift. But I did show her, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a picture going around with all the presidents we've ever had in a grid. And so you see these tons and tons of old white men. And then you see this one person of color at the end, and it shows kind of along the way that Vice President Harris would have been a slave up until this person's time, and then wouldn't have been able to vote up until this administration. And so that was the real eye-opener for my kids and allowed us to really talk about their living history, and it's really exciting.
And to a second grader, I imagine it's a little less thoughtful than that, huh?
Yes, my second grader was extremely interested mostly in Vice President Harris's youngest great niece, who is the same age, and had a very beautiful fur jacket for the parade. So that was probably our biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and if you allow them on social media, I'm sure they're getting a hoot out of all the Bernie Sanders memes that are showing up. But this inauguration for your seventh grader was unique. And there were some great moments. That amazing grace from Garth Brooks, the poet laureate at the end, were moments that I've downloaded for keeps. But there was no big crowd there. And if you look at inaugurals past, how do you explain to kiddos in the wake of the riots at the U.S. Capitol how that is?
Yeah, we have talked a lot about that. My kids aren't allowed on social media, but they do, we're not shy with the news. And so we've talked about, and they've seen some footage, which I've tried to minimize, but of the insurrection and the violence that led up to the fact that we've had to kind of put what should be this great public space, for everyone to access. We've had to put it at distance, and in a way put our own democracy at distance, which is, I think, a terrible loss. I just heard last night one of our representative's daughters was there that day, and so he was talking to her about next time she came to the Capitol, and she had said, "Dad, I never want to go there again." And that just seems so tragic to me, to think that, people are pulling away, even out of choice or not being allowed to interact with our own governing, which I think is really sad.
Social worker Penny Collins, Adoption Partners of Maine, thanks again for stepping into the big picture.